The folder that changed everything. Margate Hayes had always believed in the quiet dignity of doing what was right. At 72, with silver hair she were pulled back in an elegant twist, she'd spent 47 years married to Robert, building a life filled with Sunday dinners, grandchildren's laughter, and the kind of comfortable love that comes from decades together. Until the funeral, standing at Robert's graveside, Margaret had reached for her son's hands, needing their strength as they lowered her husband into the earth. But David and Michael had pulled away, their faces cold as winter stone. Their wives, Jennifer and Sarah, had formed a protective barrier around them, their eyes avoiding Margaret's tear-stained face. "Mom, we need some space," David had said, his voice flat. Margaret's heart had cracked, but she'd nodded. Grief did strange things to people, she understood. A week passed. Margaret had called each son daily, leaving gentle messages. "I'm making pot roast tonight, your favorite. Please come by." Silence. "I found your father's old baseball cards. Thought the boys might like the thing." Then came the invitation to the will reading. Margaret had assumed this would be a formality, a chance to finally embrace her sons, to begin healing together. Instead, she'd arrived at the lawyer's office to find the door locked, her sons and their wives inside, visible through the glass window. Michael had opened the door just wide enough to speak. He was smiling, actually smiling. This meeting is only for the heirs named in the will," he'd said, his tone almost cheerful. Dad's instructions were very specific. Jennifer had appeared beside him, her expression carrying something that looked almost like triumph. "We'll let you know if there's anything you need to sign later." Margaret had stood there, feeling the ground shift beneath her feet. 47 years of marriage, 4 children raised, countless nights nursing Robert through his illness. And she wasn't named in his will? "I don't understand," she'd whispered. "Dad knew what he was doing," Sarah had added, her voice kind but firm. "This is family business." The door had closed. Margaret had stood in that hallway for nearly 20 minutes, her hands trembling. Before finally walking to her car. At home, she'd sat in Robert's study, surrounded by his things, trying to make sense of it all. The betrayal cut deeper than anything she'd known. But beneath the pain, something else was stirring. A quiet strength she'd forgotten she possessed. Margaret opened Robert's desk drawer, looking for anything that might explain this nightmare. Bills, old photographs, and then a folder marked "Trust Documents Private." Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside were papers Robert had hidden, a second will, bank statements for accounts she'd never known existed, and letters, so many letters, from a woman named Diane, spanning 15 years, love letters, plans for a future together. Once the children were grown, and the old marriage was finally over, Margaret read every word, her tears falling onto pages that spoke of her husband's double life. The beach house he'd bought with Diane, the vacations explained away as business trips, the inheritance he'd planned to leave to Diane and, shockingly, to their sons, cutting Margaret out entirely with Diane's encouragement. But Robert had died suddenly. The paperwork was incomplete. Legally, Margaret was still his primary heir. Everything was actually hers. At the bottom of the folder was a note in Robert's handwriting, dated just 2 weeks before his death. "Tell Margaret at the reading. Let the boys handle it. She'll understand eventually." Margaret closed the folder slowly. She thought of her son's smiling faces at the lawyer's office, the way they'd shut her out without hesitation, so eager to claim their inheritance that they'd abandoned their mother in her darkest hour. Robert had poisoned them against her, prepared them to cast her aside. The next morning, Margaret dressed carefully in a navy blue suit. She applied her lipstick with a steady hand. Then she drove to Harrison and Associates, the law firm handling Robert's estate, and requested a private meeting with Thomas Harrison himself. "Mrs. Hayes, I'm so sorry about the confusion last week," Thomas began, clearly uncomfortable. "Your sons insisted." "I know what my sons insisted," Margaret said calmly. She placed the folder on his desk. "But I've found some documents I think you need to see." Thomas's expression changed as he read, his professional composure cracking. "Mrs. Hayes, this changes everything. Legally, you are the primary beneficiary. The secondary will was never properly executed. And these accounts are mine," Margaret finished. "All of it is mine. Your sons were operating under false information. They believed their father had left everything to them, but without your signature and without the proper legal documentation, they'll get nothing unless I choose to give it," Margaret said softly. Thomas nodded slowly. "That's correct. What would you like me to do?" Margaret sat quietly for a moment, thinking of all those Sunday dinners, all those birthday parties, all the love she poured into raising her boys. Then she thought of their faces at the funeral, the door closing in her hallway. "Schedule another will reading," she said, "for this Friday. Make sure my sons and their wives attend. Tell them it's mandatory." Friday arrived with autumn rain tapping against the windows of Harrison and Associates. Margaret arrived early, wearing the same elegant composure she'd worn her entire life. This time, she took her seat at the head of the conference table. When David, Michael, Jennifer, and Sarah walked in, their expressions shifted from confidence to confusion. "Mom, what are you doing here?" David asked. "Sitting in my chair," Margaret replied gently. "Please, sit down." Thomas Harrison cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming. There have been some significant developments regarding Mr. Hayes's estate." Michael leaned forward, eager. "Good. Can we finally get this settled?" "Mom, if you need to sign something, your mother doesn't need to sign anything," Thomas interrupted. "Because she is the sole legal heir to your father's estate." The room fell silent. "That's impossible," Jennifer said. "Robert told us." "My husband told you many things," Margaret said quietly. "He also told a woman named Diane many things for 15 years. He told me he was on business trips while he was at a beach house I never knew existed. He told you all that I'd agreed to step aside, that I understood. He lied." She slid copies of the folder's contents across the table, watched as comprehension, then shock, then shame dawned on her sons' faces. "Mom," David's voice cracked. "We didn't know. He said you two had agreed. He said you wanted us to have everything because I was just the wife," Margaret finished. "Someone who could be discarded when no longer convenient. And you believed it. Worse, you were happy about it." Sarah was crying now. "We thought we were following his wishes. We thought you were getting money," Margaret said, her voice still gentle but firm. "And you didn't question whether shutting out your grieving mother was the right thing to do. You didn't call. You didn't visit. You locked me out of that room with smiles on your faces." Michael's head was in his hands. "Mom, please. We're so sorry." "If we'd known, would it have mattered?" Margaret asked. "Should it have mattered? I raised you to be kind, to be compassionate. I taught you to think of others. But when you thought there was money involved, all of that disappeared." The silence stretched long. Finally, Margaret stood. "Mr. Harrison, please proceed with dividing my late husband's estate as follows. The beach house and all associated accounts will be sold, with proceeds going to organizations that support women leaving difficult marriages. The family home and remaining assets will be placed in a trust." She looked at each of her sons. "David, Michael, you will each receive a modest monthly allowance from this trust, enough to live comfortably, but not extravagantly. The bulk of the estate will go to your children's education funds and to charities in your names." "Mom," David started. Margaret held up her hand. "I'm not finished. If you want more, you'll earn it the way I did. Through kindness, through showing up, through proving that family means more than bank accounts. Every month, you'll volunteer at a charity of your choice. You'll have dinner with me every Sunday. You'll call me every week. And maybe, over time, you'll remember the values I tried to teach you." Jennifer was openly weeping. "We don't deserve this. We don't deserve your forgiveness." "No," Margaret agreed softly. "You don't. But I'm giving it anyway. Not because you've earned it, but because that's what love does. Real love. The kind your father forgot, and the kind I won't let you forget." She picked up her purse and walked toward the door, then paused. "The first Sunday dinner is this week, 5 o'clock. Don't be late." As she left the building, stepping into the autumn rain, Margaret felt something she hadn't felt in months. Not quite happiness yet, but something close to it. Peace. Her phone rang that evening. David's number. Mom, I don't even know what to say. Then just listen, Margaret said gently. Your father hurt me deeply, but he also gave me you, and despite everything, I still believe in the boys I raised. Show me I wasn't wrong. We will, David promised, his voice thick with emotion. Mom, we will, I swear it. That Sunday, Margaret set the table for 7. She made pot roast and apple pie. And when her sons arrived with their wives and children, she opened her door and her arms. The healing would take time. Trust, once broken, wasn't easily repaired. But as Margaret watched her grandsons help set the table, listened to their chatter and laughter filling her home again, she knew she'd made the right choice. Revenge could have been crushing them completely. Instead, she'd chosen something harder. She'd chosen redemption, hers and hopefully theirs. Because that's what love does. Real love. The kind that forgives without forgetting, that holds people accountable while still holding them close, that transforms betrayal into opportunity for growth. Margaret Hayes had lost her husband to lies and deception, but she'd found herself again, strong, dignified, kind, and in the end, that was the greatest inheritance of all.